Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I am Adebola Adediba. The headlines. Nigerian president set up economic advisory committee. Nigeria Labour Congress says no going back on its two-day nationwide protest as police in Lagos warn against disruptions in the state. Foreign nationals killed as 25 die in Arusha city in Tanzania road crash. And details shortly. President Bola Tinubu has set up an economic advisory committee comprising the federal government, sub-nationals, and the private sector. The president announced the setting up of the committee after he held a meeting with some key stakeholders at the State House, Abuja, on Sunday evening. Among those who were at the meeting with the president are Aliko Dangote, Rabiu Samad, Wale Tinubu, Tony Elumelu, and other selected leaders of the private sector. Tinubu said the goal of the advisory committee is to provide additional efforts in stabilizing the economy and ensuring the best economic future for Nigerians. And to talk about these, I'm being joined live on the news by Aki Fatunke, an economic analyst. Good morning. Glad to have you join me.
I'm so very happy to be here, Adebola. Good morning. And good morning, Nigerians.
The pleasure is all mine. Let's commence with your thoughts on the committee set up by the president. What do you make of it?
I'd like to say very quickly that the mark of a good leader is the capacity and ability to recognize when that he is rowing against the tide, or that when the tide changes, like Winston Churchill will say to himself, yes, I said to you yesterday, yes, I thought I was on the right path, now I need people. And that is the first thing that came to my mind when I heard of this composition of the economic team. And like most Nigerians, of course, and like a wiper in front of a windscreen, I will shift to the right and shift to the left, and hopefully continue to have the faith that the only thing I can expect is a trajectory on the upward. First of all, I am happy that that has been set. I am hopeful. I know that I, like most spectators, will always be thinking to myself, can I trust that this will deliver? It's better than nothing. No venture gain and no venture loss, I dare say. I'm happy about the composition, I must say. Let me say clearly that when I look at Innocent there, over and above my dear brother, Oluwatosin Ajayi of North, I think my preference will be for Innocent. And then I see Dangote and Rabiu, corporate matadors that had to differ at different points in time, all coming together. I think it's deft. I think it's a good move. I hope it will not end the way of Biswak Rewane, who was also part of economic advisory team to the previous President Muhammadu Buhari. What happened to him? I hope this president, who has said to Nigerians that he's going to listen, will listen very carefully. I'm also happy about Soludo, things surrounding monetary and his time back in the day. I would have loved to see, though, an Erisco Bumpet thing, but I'm happy that at least we have somebody that will be able to look at the agric food chain thing. The initial vibes that are coming out from this committee is very welcome. The president saying that we need you to give us a cold ice review. I think that is good. We don't put all knowledge in one place and now want to be like a tortoise who believes that he has it all and decide to put a gouge, on his chest rather at the back. We don't know nothing.
Yeah.
That we are doing right. What is it that we are doing wrong?
Just to chip in there, Mr. Fatunke, just to quickly chip in there, but do you believe, I know you talked about being impressed with the composition of the committee, but then do you believe this committee, so to speak, represents the diverse interests in Nigeria?
Well, 16 in number, sometimes the more cooks, the more the broth might get spoiled. Does it? Look at it, I would have loved to see youth participation, okay? And I cannot say some of the people that I see in there are not useful and useful inclined, so I would have loved to see that. I would have loved to see more of women coming into the fray. We have perhaps a few, but we need to have seen a bit much more in terms of women in business and women at the grassroots level. Hey, for the like of me, Adebola, and for the optics, I would have loved to see in this composition a known and trusted name back in the NSAS or no NSAS thing that we need. Unless, of course, I don't know, I don't have all the facts. Maybe some of those people have been invited and they didn't seem to know. And let me then throw this final one in. I would have loved to see a Professor Patutomi, a developmental economist. Again, he belongs to Labour, and I know that the president has stretched out to Labour. It may be that that has been extended to him or them, and that has not come. Likewise, somebody in the Shore camp, somebody in the Kwankwaso camp, somebody in Atiku's camp, seriously speaking, I have said that that's what I would have loved to see. I did not see anybody in the era of traditional rulers. It may not necessarily, but for me, it's string fits for purpose, and I see many of these people that are having here who have their constituency. They will go back to some of their constituency, listen to what the constituents are saying, and of course, finally, I talked about the youth, but the Labour Congress and perhaps the NANS.
But beyond. Right, but beyond the caliber of those who make up this committee, we know it is to stabilize the economy. So for you, what issues should be prioritized when it comes to these committee deliberating?
You know, Adebola, knowledge is one thing, wisdom is another, and the capacity and the serenity to know the difference is smooth and proper. For me, there are two things I'll be looking at. I'll be looking at what comes first, chicken or egg. We've talked about food security, which is very, very important. Talked about the economy, talked about national security. In the area of national security, I think, in my honest opinion, that should really come first. We should have a look at these eminent people, looking President Bola Tinubu straight in the eye, eyeball to eyeball, and tell him a basic truth. Please make this easy for us. Can we see you lead by example? Can we look at some of those things that we already have in the budget that are not priorities, that are given to giving good things surrounding, yachts, private jets, the ones that are sunk. Can we begin to now then see how we can sink them by selling them and looking at our national assets? That is one. Second, that I will be prescribing will be the fact that you cannot, as I've always said, be straight in a rough jacket, Adebola. If you give me a suit that is rough and you expect me to be straight in there, I will struggle, and I will struggle. And some of the economic advisory teams that we have had over the past have struggled because we don't have a viable constitution, so to speak, that is workable, that is economically viable. We are different in all respects, and we must recognize that. Can we, while we are working on this as short term, think of the middle term, to say that Nigeria is not negotiable, continues to lie on itself. We need to build that capacity and that trust. The last that I would then be saying that I'll be expecting to tell Mr. President that before I start, can we look at some of the balancing that we have had? I think, in my private opinion, you have a very good team, but I'd like to see a little bit more of diversity in your team. I'd like to see a bit more of the Southeasterners, unless, of course, they have a right of refusal. Those are some of the things I want to begin to see very quickly. Do I believe it is workable? Yes. If this president is going to be listening, if this president will not have the feel and think that is too proud, if this president can relay and then recoil and then reverse, I have absolutely no problem. But I think this president has started very well. I keep on saying that. He has the right policy framework in place. Implementation has been very challenging. So can this guys go back and see, implement for...
I'm afraid that's the most we can take. Mr. Akin Fatunke, economic analyst, thank you so much for your time on the news.
Thank you very much, Adewala. Nigeria will survive.
Qatar has announced that it will indeed host the Business and Investment Forum proposed by Nigerian President Bola Tinubu during his upcoming visit to the Arab nation. This surprising turn of events comes after Qatar initially declined to host the forum, citing scheduling conflicts with its Minister of Commerce and Industry, Mohammed bin Hamad Al Thani. However, in a surprising development, the Qatari embassy has officially announced the rescheduling of the Business and Investment Forum to coincide with President Bola Tinubu's visit. Despite earlier reports suggesting its disagreement between Qatar and Nigeria over the reform, a leaked memo reveals that Qatar's Ministry of Commerce and Industry has extended apologies for the rejection and confirmed the event's rescheduling. Earlier, we're joined on the news by Ambrose Ibuke, an international affairs analyst, to talk about this.
The way we run our country as Nigeria, I don't see any reason why Nigeria will be the one going to Qatar or begging Qatar to have a meeting with our president. It's just where we have placed ourselves as a country, the giant of Africa, going to a country. Qatar is just over 2 million, 2.3 million in population. Nigeria is over 220 million population. So Qatar is like 1% of Nigeria's population. And then when we talk about the GDP of Qatar, it's so far higher than that of Nigeria. GDP per capita in Qatar is $85,300, while that of Nigeria is $4,900. What we use as the statistics of 2020. You can see that the disproportionate GDP, net economic growth in Qatar. Qatar has achieved an urbanization rate of 99%, almost 100%, while Nigeria, we are still at basically 50%. So you can see they're ahead of us in terms of urbanization, in terms of economic metrics and other indices of development. But in size, in natural resources, in whatever we have as a country, we are so far, far bigger than Qatar. Because we have not played our politics well, we can see a small Qatar, having, just issuing a memo that they cannot receive our president in the sideline of the economic summit. Because maybe they have looked at it, there's nothing Nigeria has to offer them in terms of economic investment summit. What does Nigeria have to offer Qatar?
You're watching News Central now. Let's take a short break. Stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned. The presidency again on Sunday warned the Nigeria Labour Congress not to embark on its two-day nationwide protest against the rising cost of living in the country. On February 16, the NLC announced a nationwide protest scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday over the alleged government's failure to implement agreements reached between both parties on October 2nd, 2023, following the removal of the fuel subsidy. The special advisor to the president on information and strategy, Mr. Bayo Ononuga, and the police handed down the warnings as 65 civil society groups on Sunday pulled out of the planned demonstration, warning against its possible hijack, arguing that it could worsen the deteriorating situation. The NLC President Joe Ajaero had insisted in a statement on Sunday that the protests would be held on Tuesday and Wednesday as planned. The decision followed the conclusion of a 14-day ultimatum issued to the federal government to implement measures against the widespread hardship. The Nigeria Labour Congress says there is no going back on its planned 2 days nationwide protest over the economic hardship in the country. The NLC says this is even as it has uncovered plans by agents of government to cause violence against its members during the protests. In a statement signed by its national president, Joe Ajaero, the Labour Union warned that any attack on its members in the course of their protests will lead to a total withdrawal of workers' services across the country. While insisting on the rights of citizens to peaceful protests, Ajaero urged the government to come up with ways to address the pains of Nigerians. And to talk about these, I'm being joined live by Dayo Fagbulo, social commentator. Good morning, and glad to have you join me.
It's a pleasure being here.
Now, how legitimate are the concerns raised by NLC regarding alleged plans by the government against, in a bid to incite violence against protesters during the demonstrations?
In my opinion, it's just basically labor rhetoric. This is what happens when conflicts like this arise. Everybody has something to say. Yes, you would expect resistance on the part of government because one of the things that drive economic indices and one of the things that drives the crisis we have in the economy is also behavioral, and that means human responses to economic indices. So basically what happens is, for as long as there is more resistance, you will have effects like fear, you will have uncertainty, which are elements that drive, economics basically, and you will have things like inflation, you will have some instability in the system. So yes, the government in certain ways will try and resist the NLC, but it's just rhetoric. This has been going on for years. It goes on in every government, in every situation, and more so in Nigeria, basically.
Well, it's interesting you talked about fear. Speaking of which, what measures do you think the government can take to ensure that the safety and also security of protesters, are protected amidst, fears of potential attacks?
I'm not sure that. I'll tell you how it works. The belief in government itself is dependent on its capacity to implement its promises over the years. In this case, this might not be happening because this government has made several promises and in the first 8 months, they haven't been able to do anything. So I don't think there are too many assurances that could be given to anybody or any party whatsoever as regarding security. But having said that, one of the things they could do is they could pacify the situation. I mean, they could call for a meeting, an emergency meeting, have some kind of conversation that will elevate the fears of the NLC. They could show good faith, as they call it, by extending an olive branch or an arm of friendship to them. It's the only way forward. I mean, there are no assurances. Assurances have been given in the past, and we haven't gotten much results. So these kind of things create what you call uncertainty in the system, and therefore the fear we're talking about is not bound to go very quickly. There's going to be, they have to extend another olive branch to the NLC to quell things. This is my opinion.
What could likely be the impacts of a crackdown on protesters by law enforcement agencies, and how would that impact our present reality?
A crackdown could be a problem, and I'll try and explain that. It's the case of the man crying wolf. If you continue to show that you are losing control of a system, what happens is the people will respond. These are behavioral elements of economics. People respond to uncertainty. They respond to situations in which they cannot predict what the system is going to do. We call it unpredictability. Now, the issue is that the moment they crack down, it means that NLC does have a sincere point. So the best way to address this issue is for the government, like I said, to pacify it as opposed to increasing the tension in the system. I mean, any crackdown now speaks to a different motive of the government. That means the government is unsure of itself. That means the government has insecurities which they want to quell by force. I don't think a crackdown is going to work, and the effect is going to be negative.
Okay, let's talk about the 65 civil society groups who have, pulled out from the planned demonstrations. What impact will these have on the protest itself?
The conversation does not end with 65 of the groups pulling out. I'm sure you understand that. It's a continuum. And the question really is, what exactly are the people saying? I mean, if you step out on the streets, what does the average man have to say about the situation? I believe very strongly that one of the positive elements is that there must be a dialogical conversation. There must be a conversation amongst multiple spheres. The 65 that have pulled out have spoken. They have said, yes, we're happy to be passive in the interim. But what of the rest of society? I think it's good that there are multiple conversations, because multiple conversations bring multiple perspectives, and multiple perspectives brings more knowledge to the situation. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't change the fact that we have a crisis of living, we have an economic crisis going on, and the more people that speak to it, the more attention the government will pay to it.
Now,
That's
we have a
case.
Yeah, all right. We have a case of the government saying NLC should back out of the planned protest. On the other hand, we have NLC insisting they will embark on the, on the protest. I mean, what can be the potential consequences for NLC's decision to proceed with the protest, both in the short term or long term, on, the labor relations and as well as governance in Nigeria?
In my opinion, I don't think at any point in time the NLC has to align with government. I don't mean this in a negative sense. It's very important, like I said, that within a system, there must be resistance, because what resistance does, it brings in some form of efficiency. And let me try to explain that to you. The human being is, the human nature itself is predicated on something that we call resistance. Learning occurs within a system when there is resistance to that system. That means when human beings are comfortable, we do not change the dynamics most of the time. We change our dynamics or improve our dynamics when there is resistance. So the job of the NLC in itself, as a labor congress, is to push to create that resistance that will bring about what we call new learning. So the position of the NLC on the long term is to resist the government, to ensure that the government itself becomes more efficient. The government learns from its past experiences and improves on them. If the NLC is taken out of the equation, if the resistance, of the NLC is taken out of the equation, the consequences is a government that is lukewarm and is not pushed towards changing its dynamics. Therefore, NLC is doing its job, and it's doing its job well. I am hoping that along the line, they will come to a consensus that will improve the quality of living for the average Nigerian. That is what is important. And I also hope that the government will learn, because they need to keep learning. The moment they stop learning, what we will have is a stagnant situation, or what we call inertia. And this will disrupt everything we have hoped for or dreamed for. Development is based on that resistance. Human beings learn when they are opposed. So resistance is not a bad thing. NLC is not a bad thing, short term and long term.
And that's a fine place to wrap up. Thank you so much for your expertise on the news. Dayo Fagbulo, a social commentator. Thank you once again.
It's a pleasure.
Former Vice President of Nigeria, Atiku Abubakar, has asked President Bola Tinubu to take lessons from Argentina's Javier Milei reforms. Atiku said Argentina and Nigeria closed the last quarter of the year 2023 on a similar path of economic downturn, adding that both leaders inherited a disoriented economy, but both applied different measures to recovery. The former vice president said what Milei did to return his country to a place where investors are starting to believe should serve as a lesson to Nigeria's Bola Tinubu. Economic activity in December fell to 3.1% from November, according to government data published on Thursday, a drop not seen since April 2022. Earlier, we're joined on the news by Otivie Ubuazo, a policy analyst, to talk about this.
They are from different ideological schools. President Joe belongs to the far right. And that is why in his policies, he has privatized nearly 40 state-owned enterprises. And in any case, in Nigeria, there are no state enterprises to privatize, except maybe NLC, which the presidential candidate of PDP promised to privatize if was elected. Then the second thing, so when you look at Tinubu, the philosophy of the All Progressive Congress is social democracy, which is a little bit to the left. So it's not possible to prescribe the same policies for both President Joe Ajaero and President Tinubu. And if you look at the substance, that is the challenge of criticism in Nigeria and the danger of single story or the danger of monocausality. In the world today, we are living in a fruitful world where there's a lot of volatility, there is uncertainty, there is complexity, there is ambiguity, there is diversity, there is disruption, and there is digitalization.
You're live with News Central TV. Let's take a short break. Stay with us. The private residence of the Minister of State in the Federal Capital Territory Administration, FCTA, Dr. Maria Mahmood, was raised by fire on Sunday afternoon. While the emergency response was slow, it was gathered that nothing could be saved from the property located at number 9 Justice Roselyn Ukeji Close in the highbrow area of Asokoro. Special advisor on media to the minister, Mr. Austin Elumwe, who confirmed the incident, said the cause of the fire was not immediately known and was consequently being investigated by relevant authorities. Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde has ordered the immediate closure of a factory suspected of engaging in illegal mining operations along the Idi-Ayure Road in Oluyole local government area of Ibadan. Accompanied by security officials, the governor personally inspected the factory, reaffirming his commitment to combating unauthorized mining activities in the state. The Governor Makinde also pledged ongoing collaboration with the federal government to address legal complexities surrounding mining operations, prioritizing the public interest. This crackdown comes on the heels of recent arrests by the Nigerian Secret and Civil Defense Corps, with the state commandant, Mr. Augustine Pandonu, confirming the apprehension of 10 suspected illegal miners.
You can see what's going on here. Still the same problem, illegal mining activities, and the folks are even getting bolder and bolder. This place, according to records available to us, was meant to be a yard for recycled tires and batteries, but coming in here, you can see that the operation, there's no single battery.
The recent International Kanem Borno Cultural Summit held in Maiduguri has set the stage for promoting peace and unity between Nigeria and other countries across the globe through cultural exchange and collaboration. The summit, which brought together representatives from various countries to celebrate the rich cultural heritage of Kanem Borno, showcased the power of cultural diplomacy in fostering understanding and cooperation among diverse communities. News Central's Umaru Kirawa has details.
Kanem Borno, a historic region in Nigeria, hosted its first ever International Cultural Summit to celebrate its rich cultural heritage and promote peace in the region. The summit brought together cultural experts, scholars and representatives from various countries to discuss ways to preserve and promote Kanem Borno's unique traditions and costumes.
One of the things I really want to do within the ministry is to see how we can create a museum of Kanem Borno. Even beyond that, to see how we can have the traditions and values of the Kanem Borno have presence in international museums and also in the National Museum that we're going to construct very soon in Abuja.
The news for the establishment of Kanem Borno Museum towards preserving and promoting the unique cultural identity was welcomed and celebrated.
Mutane sun ba da kansu, gwamna na Niger da na Nigeria duka sun gama kansu, sun ba mu izini mun zo.
Mu haɗa kanmu, mu san junanmu, mu kiyaye yarenmu da al'adarmu.
Za mu ci gaba ko ina kauye-kauye birni yau an yi a nan gobe za a yi a nan duka insha Allah za mu ci gaba da yi.
Kar wannan abu ya yanke yara mu masu tuna su tashi da shi ba tare da bambancin kasa wannan Cameroon, Chad, Niger ba. Kowa kasansa daban amma mu tushen mu daya, addini mu daya, harshen mu daya, shi yasa kai wannan taron.
Sakona ga al'umma shine wato a nemi zaman lafiya, a haɗa kai, a kiyaye al'adu, a so juna.
Participants also explored opportunities for cultural exchange and collaboration to strengthen ties between communities in different parts of the world.
Je suis venu représenter ici toute la communauté du Bénin Kanouri.
The summit is seen as a significant step towards fostering unity and understanding among diverse cultures with the hope of building a more peaceful and inclusive society.
Let us work to unite the Kanem Borno peoples and resuscitate our lost culture. As you are all aware, Borno is known for its rich cultural heritage and Islamic civilization for over a millennium that earned us the enviable title of Home of Peace.
With the melodious sound of the Kanuri Gangakura permeating everywhere during the summit, the attendance of more than 10 different countries is said to signify important part to cultural sustainability in building a more harmonious society. In Maiduguri for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
At least 15 civilians were killed and 2 others injured during a terrorist attack on a Catholic church during Sunday Mass in northern Burkina Faso. And this is just the latest in a series of atrocities blamed on jihadist groups active in the region, some of which have targeted Christian churches, while others have involved the abduction of clergy. Burkina Faso is part of the vast Sahel region, which has been locked in a battle against rising violent extremism since Libya's civil war in 2011, followed by an Islamist takeover of northern Mali in 2012. The jihadist insurgency spilled over into Burkina Faso and Niger from 2015. The late president of Namibia, Hage was laid to rest in the country's Heroes Acre Cemetery on Sunday, following a state funeral attended by African leaders, the German president and Princess Anne, the sister of Britain's King Charles III. Gengob was interred in a mausoleum at Heroes Acre on the outskirts of the capital, Windhoek, as mothers paid tribute to the man they hailed as a nation builder and a pan-African hero. His death saw a surge of patriotism, with Namibians from across the political divide coming together to mourn. And this is the first time Namibia has buried a president since its independence from South Africa, then under white minority rule in 1990. And to talk about this, I'm being joined live on the news by Esther Mbathere, a journalist at Namibian newspaper. Good morning. Glad to have you join me, Esther.
Yes, good morning.
All right, let's talk about the legacy left behind by the president, a late president, Gengob. What do you think he left behind in terms of legacy for Namibia and as well as for Africa, as a continent?
Well, President Gengob was hailed as one of those presidents who had the unwavering dedication to the principles of inclusivity, justice, and equality, as well as unity. His legacy also comes through the constitutional democracy, peace and unity and reconciliation. Because you remember that he was part of the group that drafted Namibia's constitution in 1989, just as you mentioned earlier, that Namibia became independent from South Africa in 1990. Now, also they are saying that his leadership was also marked by a vision that transcended political boundaries, emphasizing the importance of collective efforts to build a better future for all. What is also happening is that from the business community, they saw him as one that strive towards a green hydrogen, inclusive, sustainable development, as well as fostering a culture of innovation. And we saw that also through a lot. Namibia is currently working on the green hydrogen plant. And also Namibia has been a country that has always been the forefront of innovation. When you look at 2022, we also had one of the internet cables being launched through Namibia and so on. What they are also saying is that he was one of those characters that who was very honest. So even if it was offensive to some, and we saw that also earlier this year when he put out his support against Israel for the attack on Gaza, which he amplified thoroughly because of his morals and principles.
Let me talk a bit about the funeral, procession. Was there any notable moment for you that stood out?
The one thing that stood out for us as Namibians was, and it's still on the lips of many Namibians, is first his firstborn son, Mangaliso Fernandez Gengob, who came through. He lives in the United States with his parents, with his mother. And then the other part was having a member of the opposition party being part of the pallbearers. That was Honorable McHenry Benani. He's the president of the official opposition party of Namibia. So, and then what also stood out is the many people that came from all over the world. We had about 25 heads of states that came to pay tribute to the president. And of course, what also stood out among those heads of state is the presence of the German president, that's Franz Steinmeier, who came, and he actually at the memorial service, he said it is about time that Germany actually acknowledged and apologizes for the genocide that was caused in Namibia by the Germans when Namibia was a colony of Germany in 1904 to 1908, where about over 10,000 Namibians were killed. And what also stood out is the Princess Anne of the sister of King Charles, as well as his friends from South Africa, his friends from all over the world. We had Brazilians, we had Sao Tome and Principe presidents, and so on. The other part that also stood out for us was the whole thing about his widow speaking up, because it is very uncommon for Namibians to have a widow speak at the funeral. But I guess it's because President Gengob was also an unconventional person. He didn't really conform to the norms, and with that we saw it throughout his tenure as a president, because he always avoided to be part of tribal connections. He always indicated that he's just president of Namibia. He's not president of a tribe. The other part was also where we had traditional leaders from his tribe, which is the Damara tribe, that were and also trying to say that he should at least, or his remains should have at least been taken home to Otjozondjupa region, where he hails from. He's now buried in the Comas region, which is in the capital city, which is about 300 kilometers from where he is from. That is part of the things that stood out.
Esther, let me end by asking you if you think there are any challenges Namibians may face, in this post-Geingob era.
Okay, post-Geingob era, because remember this year is Namibia's election year. We are headed to the polls for the National Assembly as well as presidential elections. So we are currently now, it is the whole void that he has left in the ruling SWAPO party, where he was also president of that party. The party has now about 80 days to choose a new president for the country, for the party. But then also it means that that president will most probably be the candidate for the upcoming presidential elections. But we are now faced with two challenges, because already last year, when the party had its normal Congress, they voted Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, who is the current vice president of the party, as their candidate for the upcoming elections. So we see this as one of the challenges that the country will be facing, because we are already looking at now the other opposition parties to see who are they putting forward as the presidential candidate. So those are the challenges that we're facing. But other than that, Namibia has stood the test of time. So throughout the mourning process, which took about 22 days of President Hage Geingob, the whole country literally came to a standstill and united in this whole process. So we weren't really faced with the issues of, say, war or anything. The transition to a new president was so smooth, and there were a few questions around the constitution.
Well, just about in there, Esther, I'm afraid we are out of time. But thank you so much for your time on the news. And once again, our deepest condolences to Namibians. Thank you so much, Esther Mbathera. Many thanks for your time. In the east of the continent, a road crash in northern Tanzania has killed at least 25 people, including several foreigners. The accident occurred when a Kenyan-registered lorry hit 3 other vehicles, including one that was carrying foreign nationals volunteering at a school. The dead included an American, a South African, and other nationals from Kenya, Togo, Madagascar, and Burkina Faso. The injured were people from Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Switzerland, Britain, and Mali. Police are looking for the driver of the lorry that caused the accident and who is said to have fled after the incident. President Samia Hassan has sent her condolences to the families of the deceased and called for motorists to adhere to road safety regulations. And now let's connect for details in business.
In business, Qatar has reversed its decision and agreed to host the Business and Investment Forum proposed by Nigeria during President Bola Tinubu's visit on March 2, 2024. The Qatar Chamber of Commerce will now host the event on March 3, 2024, as per Nigeria's proposal. This comes after initial reports based on a leaked memo on February 24, 2024, indicated that Qatar had declined the forum, citing the unavailability of Mohammed bin Hamad Al Thani, the country's Minister of Commerce and Industry. The earlier statement from the Qatar embassy in Abuja had also suggested a lack of agreement between Qatar and Nigeria on investment promotion. The subsequent agreement to host the forum signals a positive development in bilateral relations. And in Africa's largest economy, the Nigerian federal government anticipates generating 1,268 megawatts of power through the concession and development of 8 hydropower projects, a result of public-private partnerships. 3 projects have already been assigned to concessionaires, and the Federal Executive Council has approved another. According to a February 2024 document from the Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation, 3 hydropower projects are completed, while the remaining 5 are at various stages of development. The Minister of
And now to sports stories. 10-man Milford FC knocked out Kaizer Chiefs from the last of 32 rounds of the Nedbank Cup with a 5-4 penalty shootout win after a goalless draw of 120 minutes of football played at the FNB Stadium on Sunday evening. The Motsepe Foundation Championship Club have won once away from home this season and were 22 places below Kaizer Chiefs on the league table, just 1 point above the relegation zone in the Premier Soccer League just before the cup fixture. Kaizer Chiefs were record 13-time winners of the Nedbank Cup, but have now exited the tournament at the last 32 round in 3 of the last 4 seasons, with these defeats also ending their hopes of breaking their long trophy drought, which stretches back to 2015. And that's all on the news at this hour. But before we go, let's take a look again at some of the major stories. Nigerian president set up economic advisory committee. Nigeria Labour Congress says no going back on its 2-day nationwide protest as police in Lagos warn against disruptions in the state. Foreign nationals killed as 25 die in Arusha city in Tanzania road crash. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen and follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch us live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Adebola Adeduba.